The Grand Tribunal Hall of Veltar Prime stood like a shrine to arrogance. Crystal spires arced overhead, refracting the system's twin suns into shifting bands of color across polished obsidian floors. Beneath the ceremonial grandeur, silence pressed like a weight. Not reverence, anticipation. Judgment. Sergeant Tark Valen entered alone. His gait was uneven, hindered by an old wound he no longer tried to conceal. He wore no medals, no house colors. Just the matte black cloak of a war relic, exiled, disgraced, forgotten by design. His scaled skin, once deep emerald, had dulled to the gray of oxidized bronze. But his eyes, those remained sharp. 3 rows of tribunal seats loomed above him, each holding a representative of the Empire's ruling castes. At the center sat Grand Strategos Real Xerax, his mandibles twitching in smug anticipation. His lacquered exoskeleton gleamed under the light, decorated with gold inlays and the insignia of military perfection. He leaned forward. "Sergeant Valen," Xerax said, voice cutting through the chamber like a scalpel. "You are here to provide insight into Operation Firewake. Briefly. You have 5 segments." Tark's voice was low, deliberate. "That won't be enough." Murmurs rippled through the gallery above. Spectators, mostly military aides and intelligence officers, shifted in their seats. Some laughed quietly. Others simply watched, curious to hear what this dusty fossil could offer that mattered now. Xerax smirked. "Then make it count." Tark stepped forward, his boots echoing on the flawless floor. He looked up at the tribunal, not defiant but haunted. "You asked me here to explain why the deployment of Terran ground forces into fringe systems is dangerous," he said. "But that's not the right question." He paused. Not a sound. "The right question," he continued, "is why it's already too late." A flicker of interest crossed a few faces. Xerax folded 2 of his limbs across his chest. "Your report blames the humans for the collateral destruction of Vornak 4. Yet the Council's official record cites rebel mining activity triggering seismic collapse." Tark nodded slowly. "Because the truth was buried under that rubble." He activated a hollow emitter embedded in his gauntlet. A shimmering map of Vornak 4 projected into the air, dense jungle, cratered plains, fractured cities clinging to volcanic ridges. 2 years ago, I was assigned to oversee Imperial coordination with Terran forces during a joint operation here. The rebel threat had stalled our advance for months. High Command authorized limited Terran support. "Limited," Xerax repeated. "And what did your limited support do, Sergeant?" Tark didn't answer right away. Instead, the projection changed, grainy footage, tactical overlays, red thermals flickering through the brush. Shadows moved fast, too fast. Terran fire teams, silent and surgical, slipped through the jungle like wraiths. Enemy outposts were marked, then gone. "They didn't fight like we do," Tark said. "There was no ceremony. No honor. No fear." He looked up, eyes locking onto the strategos. "They didn't pause. They didn't pray. They didn't ask why." The room was still. The footage changed again, now a full platoon of rebel troops panicking, firing wildly into the dark. Screams echoed through static as shapes emerged behind them, fast and low. The screen cut to black. "I was assigned to observe. Report their methods. Relay intel back to command. But from the first operation, I knew something was wrong." Xerax scoffed. "Wrong? The humans won, Sergeant. They broke the siege in 1/3 of the projected time. At 1/3 of the cost." Tark's voice turned sharp. "At whose cost?" He stepped closer to the podium, talons flexing. "You measure victory in territory gained, in rebels crushed. I measure it in the faces of my squad, Darnathi veterans, who watched men rip throats with their teeth because ammo ran low and retreat wasn't an option." Gasps spread through the audience. One of the tribunal members, a feathered Korathi noble, shifted uncomfortably. Tark continued. "You think you control them. You don't. You think they need your wars. They don't. You gave them weapons thinking they'd use them like we do. But you never understood the Terran mindset. And what is that, exactly? Zerax sneered. Tark's voice dropped. They don't fight to win. They fight to survive. And if you mistake the difference, they will show you the price. The hologram flickered again. Footage this time from Tark's helmet, first-person view. Bodies stacked. Flames spreading. Screams. The outline of a Terran soldier, helmeted, motionless, rifle down, watching a bunker collapse on fleeing combatants. No reaction. No words. Just silence. They don't celebrate, Tark said. They process. Quietly. Coldly. And then they move on to the next kill. Enough. Zerax barked, rising. You are not here to lecture the tribunal with dramatics. You were called to provide factual assessment. Tark raised his chin. Then here's a fact. If you authorize full deployment of Terran battalions into the Erixus rebellions, the war will end. Quickly. But so will any illusion that the Empire holds moral authority. You think that matters? Zerax spat. Tark didn't flinch. It will. When every border world becomes a graveyard, and you realize the fire you lit won't stay contained. There was silence, heavy and suffocating. Then, slowly, Tark deactivated the projection and stepped back. You don't have to believe me, he said. But you should know, I believed in the Empire. I fought for it. Bled for it. And I watched it beg for help from a species it couldn't begin to understand. He looked at each tribunal member in turn. And I'm here to tell you, with what time I have left, you were warned. With that, he turned and walked away from the center, cloak trailing like smoke behind him. The scent of Vornak 4 was the first thing Tark remembered. Rotting foliage, damp soil, acrid smoke, an ecosystem in collapse. The jungle breathed death in every direction. Trees choked by ash. Rivers thick with blood and oil. Tark's boots sank into black mud as he stepped off the shuttle ramp. His squad followed, all seasoned Darnathi troopers, tight-jawed and silent. They were expecting chaos. What they found was order. Rows of humans lined the forward trench, silent, still, every weapon spotless, every uniform sealed. Not one spoke. No war chants. No gestures of camaraderie. Just calm, surgical presence. A captain approached them. Human male, broad shoulders, pale-eyed, unreadable. His voice was quiet but clipped. You're late. Tark blinked. We were diverted. Ran into resistance near Sector 12. You won't anymore, the man said, turning. We cleared it. Tark's second-in-command, Trelise, muttered. Cleared? We had 2 battalions stuck in that valley for a cycle. Exactly, the captain said without turning. No further explanation. Just motion for them to follow. They marched through forward base Sigma. No flags, no banners, just function. Munitions stacked, tents reinforced with scavenged enemy metal. Tark noticed something else. No wounded. Where's your med station? He asked. The human didn't stop walking. We don't need one. Our dead don't make it back. Tark felt a chill despite the heat. The next day brought their first joint mission. Objective: overrun a rebel compound embedded deep in the jungle. Tark's squad was ordered to observe and provide backup. The humans didn't ask for help, they just nodded, locked their gear, and disappeared into the trees like shadows. Hours passed. No comms chatter. No sound but jungle noise and distant thunder. Then came the signal. One word. Done. Tark's team advanced cautiously through the underbrush, expecting scattered firefights, cries for help. Instead, they found silence. The rebel compound was still smoking, walls breached inward. Dozens of bodies lay where they'd fallen, shot mid-run, some clutching weapons they never fired. Trelise knelt beside a corpse. No signs of a fight. Tark studied the pattern. 1 shot per rebel. No crossfire. No misses? Clean. He turned to the human sergeant overseeing post-op. Why didn't they surrender? They tried. The man replied flatly. Didn't matter. What do you mean? The human glanced at him. Couldn't take the risk. Tark's jaw tightened. They had no weapons. One had a white flag. The human just shrugged. Flags don't stop bullets. That night, back at camp, Tark gathered his squad around the perimeter fire. None of them spoke for a long time. Trelise broke the silence. This isn't war. It's extermination. They call it doctrine, Tark muttered. Another soldier, Marvin, looked ill. I saw one of them snap a rebel's neck with his boot. Didn't even blink. They don't seem angry, Trelise added. Just efficient. Worse, Tark said. They're comfortable. The tribunal chamber stirred as the next piece of footage played overhead. Tark stood silently beside the projection. His claws were clenched behind his back. Here, he said, nodding to the hovering display. This is from day 4. We intercepted a rebel convoy retreating toward the mountains. Terrans volunteered to pursue. The footage showed 4 humans moving through dense undergrowth. No words. No panic. Just smooth, coordinated motion. They flanked the convoy before the rebels knew they were being hunted. Gunfire burst, short and surgical. Targets dropped one by one. Tark had watched it 20 times. Still, it felt unreal. Then came the part he never spoke of. One rebel, barely older than a child, ran. A human followed, fast and silent. The rebel stumbled. Dropped his rifle. Raised his hands. The human didn't slow. One shot, center mass. The boy crumpled. Back in the tribunal, gasps echoed. One of the feathered diplomats rose from her seat. He was unarmed. Tark said nothing. Just stared at the frozen image on the screen. The boy's eyes were still open. Zerax's mandibles twitched. This proves only that Terrans are efficient under stress. They act decisively. That is not a crime. They're not acting under stress, Tark replied. They act like this always. It's not instinct. It's training. Training to do what? The stratego snapped. To make sure no one ever fights them again. Later, back on Vornak 4, Tark reviewed the after-action logs. Body count, 212. Human casualties, 0. He found one of the human officers alone, cleaning a blade with sand and water. Tark approached. I want to understand, he said. Why not take prisoners? Why kill runners? The man looked up, expression unreadable. Because the longer the war drags, the more people die. The more mercy we show, the more it costs everyone. Tark frowned. So mercy is weakness? No, the man said. It's a delay. And delays bleed. Tark sat across from him. Your people don't fear death, do they? The human's smile was thin. We do. That's why we make sure it happens to the other side first. In the tribunal, Tark turned off the footage. He faced the court. This is what you unleashed, he said. Not soldiers. Weapons wrapped in flesh. No remorse. No hesitation. Not because they're broken, but because that's how they were built. He stepped forward. You think you can control that? Give them rules, objectives, parameters? He shook his head. The moment you authorized human deployment, you gave up control. And now you're too proud to admit it. The tribunal fell into silence again. Zerax looked visibly agitated, eyes darting across the room. You exaggerate. These are isolated incidents. Tark's voice was calm. You haven't seen the rest yet. The memory always began with thunder. Not weather, artillery. Vornak Ivy's mountains shook under continuous bombardment, distant peaks glowing orange where rebel plasma batteries hammered the sky. Tark remembered watching the horizon pulse like a dying star while the Terrans prepared for their next advance. He and his squad stood near the command post, reviewing maps spread across a steel slab. Rebel forces had fortified the entire mountain range. The Empire wanted a siege. The Terrans wanted a solution. Their commander arrived at dusk. She stepped through the folding doors without spectacle, average height, reinforced exoarmor, helmet tucked under one arm. Her hair was braided tight, her face clean and unreadable. No medals decorated her chest. No nameplate. only a serial code and a crimson stripe down her left shoulder. Every human nearby straightened. Tark understood instantly. This was someone whose presence alone reorganized the air. She spoke in a tone free of emotion. "Field briefing in 30 seconds. Tark exchanged a glance with Trelise. "That's the butcher of Sector 9. He whispered. A shadow crossed the commander's face as if she heard it, but she didn't acknowledge the name. When the holo display activated, she pointed to a ridge highlighted in red. "Rebel Command Hub. Heavily fortified. Artillery reinforced. Empire recommends siege. Siege is inefficient." "And your plan?" Tark asked. "Erase the ridge." Tark's jaw tensed. "There are Imperial units in that area. Evacuation would take time." "Rebels won't give you time," she replied. "This ends tonight." Trelise stepped forward. "Our doctrine forbids unprovoked annihilation. Collateral risks." "Noted," the commander said. "Dismissed." Dismissed, not the argument but them. Tark felt something cold twist in his chest. "You can't proceed without Imperial authorization." The commander lifted her gaze, eyes as steady as a locked scope. "I don't need authorization. I have an objective." Her certainty unsettled everyone. Tark stepped closer. "At least allow us to extract the Imperials." "Negative," she said. "Extraction increases detection risk. Detection compromises strike." She paused, then added with chilling calm. "And compromises the war." Trelise whispered. "They're treating us like variables. Like numbers in a calculation." Night fell fast on Vornak 4. The air vibrated with distant gunfire. Tark's squad stood on an overlook facing the mountain range, watching Terran artillery crews calibrate a colossal launch platform being assembled from modular pieces. They moved with frightening precision, no chatter, no hesitation, each step mirroring the next as though choreographed. Tark approached the commander one last time. "You're sacrificing our own forces," he said. "If they hold position, they were already lost," she answered. "Better to lose a few than lose a war." "Those are people," Tark snapped. "Soldiers who trusted you." The commander's silence said everything. Tark looked at her closely. Her eyes didn't carry cruelty. They carried something worse, clarity. As if she saw war not in morality, but in outcomes. "What happened to you?" he asked quietly. She adjusted her gauntlets. "Survival." Then she walked away. The strike began at 3:12 local time. The first projectile roared upward, a pillar of fire punching through the clouds. A second followed, then a third, forming a pattern Tark didn't recognize, until he realized the arcs weren't aimed at the ridge. They were aimed through it. A half-second later, the projectiles came down like falling planets. A tectonic boom tore through the valley. The ridge didn't crumble, it vaporized. A wall of incandescent rock blossomed into a blinding mushroom plume. The shockwave flattened forests, lifted soil into the air, and punched Tark backward into the mud. He heard Trelise shouting, felt debris rain across his armor. Then the screams began. Not rebels. Imperials. The comm channels crackled with panic signals, unit identifiers he recognized. Desperate calls for evacuation. For medical aid. For someone to explain what just happened. They cut off one by one. When the blast wave faded, the ridge was gone. Not shattered, gone. A glowing crater remained where the mountain and the Imperial units once stood. Tark staggered to his feet, heart pounding. The Terrans were already packing equipment, securing gear, preparing for next objective. Not one paused to acknowledge the devastation they'd unleashed. "That was an Imperial stronghold!" Tark shouted. The commander approached him with an expression unchanged by the destruction behind her. "It was a rebel hub with Imperial interference. You knew they were there?" "Yes." "And you did it anyway?" "Yes." Tark stared, claws curling. "You murdered allies." "I neutralized strategic liabilities." Tark's voice shook with fury. "They fought for you." "No," she said. "They fought for themselves. We fight for the outcome." Her soldiers didn't turn. didn't react. They simply prepared for the next march. Trellis rushed to Tark's side. There are survivors in the rubble. We need to help. The commander's tone hardened. Negative. The mission continues. Tark stepped forward. You're abandoning them? They're non-viable, she replied. Move on. Tark lunged, grabbing her arm. In less than a heartbeat, he found himself on the ground, ribs aching, her knee pressed lightly against his chest, not enough to break him, just enough to demonstrate fragility. You interfere with the objective, she murmured, and you become the objective. Her meaning hit him like another blast wave. The Terrans weren't allies. They were a separate force, one the Empire mistakenly believed it commanded. When she released him, Tark rose shakily. His squad helped him stand, each one wearing the same expression, disbelief giving way to fear. Fear not of the rebels. Fear of the humans beside them. The tribunal hall was so silent Tark could hear his own pulse when the footage ended. The hologram faded, leaving only scorched blackness where the ridge had once stood. That kinetic strike, Tark said, was never authorized. The butcher made the call herself. Zerax leaned forward, mandibles trembling with outrage. This is fabrication. The Empire does not tolerate such autonomous action. Tark's stare was hollow. And yet she received commendation. Quietly. Classified as containment success. Several tribunal members exchanged horrified looks. Zerax slammed his fist. Your claims insult the Empire. You insult yourselves, Tark replied. You needed a weapon, so you hired one. You didn't ask how it was forged. You just pointed it at an enemy and assumed it would behave. He paced slowly, claws clicking against the floor. We believed humans were like us, soldiers with limits. But humans do not wage war the way we do. They don't consider survival an expectation. It's a requirement. And anything that threatens it, enemy or ally, is removed. His voice lowered. We unleashed something we weren't prepared to understand. The chamber trembled with unease. Tark closed the hollow recorder. And the worst part, he said, is that all of this was only the beginning. The tribunal doors opened with a hiss. All eyes turned as the guards escorted the human into the chamber, manacled, flanked by armored escorts, head unbowed. He walked with a measured gait, posture relaxed, face unreadable. Scars ran like a topographic map across his cheeks and jaw, silent testimony to survival, not vanity. He wore the remnants of a Terran recon uniform, scorched fabric, armor plating cracked at the shoulder, his left boot partially melted. And yet, he looked entirely in control, like the room belonged to him. Tark watched him step onto the platform. No fear. No curiosity. Just stillness. The lead guard deactivated the cuffs and backed away. Grand Strategos Zerax broke the silence. State your designation. The man tilted his head slightly. Private First Class Jared Shaw. 3rd Recon, Earth Defense Legion. His voice was calm. Unshaken. Flat as a rifle report. You are a prisoner of the Galactic Tribunal, Zerax said. Answer truthfully and you may earn leniency. Shaw's lips twitched. Not a smile, more like amusement. Truth's all I've got left. Zerax leaned forward. Do you acknowledge the strike on Vornak 4, Sector 9, was unauthorized? No, Shaw replied. I acknowledge it was necessary. You killed Imperial troops, Zerax snapped. Correct. The Strategos hissed. And you show no remorse? Should I? Shaw asked plainly. The rebels were dug in. Orders were to neutralize all command and artillery targets. That ridge was the war. You annihilated friendly forces. No, Shaw corrected. We neutralized the liability. The Empire left them there. We finished the mission. Tark stepped forward. Was there ever a moment you questioned it? Shaw looked at him. Something flickered in those eyes, not regret, not shame. Recognition. We questioned it every second, he said. Questioned why we were there. Why we fought alongside amateurs with polished armor and no plan. Why the Empire needed us to clean up its war. Tark frowned. Then why didn't you stop? Because humans don't stop when something feels wrong, Shaw said. We stop when it's over. Zerax interjected. You act like machines. Is that how you were trained? Shaw's expression sharpened. No machine would do what we've done. Silence. Shaw scanned the room, taking in every species, every posture, every twitch of disbelief. You brought us in thinking we were blunt instruments, he said. You didn't understand what Earth breeds. You saw our wars and assumed we were primitive, violent, predictable. He stepped toward the center of the platform. But we learned something through those wars. Every invasion, every civil collapse, every extinction event we danced on the edge of. We learned how to survive when survival wasn't fair. Zerax's mandibles clicked. You glorify brutality. No, Shaw said. We optimize it. Tark felt the temperature in the chamber drop, not physically, but atmospherically. Shaw wasn't boasting. He wasn't threatening. He was simply stating reality. We don't fight for honor, Shaw continued, or for conquest. We fight because if we don't, we die. You gave us a job, and we did it the only way we know how, completely. One of the tribunal members, a crystalline Venari, leaned forward. And what would you have us do, Terran? Withdraw our forces? Let the rebels burn our colonies? Shaw considered that. No, he said. I'd have you think before you feed your enemies to something you don't understand. He turned to Tark. You saw it. You tried to warn them. I failed, Tark said quietly. No, Shaw replied. They failed to listen. Zerax stood now, voice rising. You presume to lecture us, you, a prisoner of war. I'm not here to lecture you, Shaw said. I'm here because he nodded toward Tark. Wanted you to hear what comes next. Zerax paused. And what is that? Shaw straightened. We've been recalled. That struck the tribunal like a plasma bolt. Heads turned. Quiet gasps rippled through the chamber. Tark's eyes narrowed. All Terran units? Shaw nodded once. Evac already began 3 days ago. No announcement. No demand. Just gone. Zerax stammered. Why would Earth do that? This war isn't over. To us, Shaw said. It is. Tark realized what that meant. Earth had finished the job. They'd broken the back of the rebellion, and now they were leaving, not waiting for applause. Not seeking approval. They were never your soldiers, Tark murmured. No, Shaw said. We were your scalpel. Now the cutting's done. Zerax's tone turned acidic. Then Earth has no further role in Imperial defense. Earth never did, Shaw said coldly. You didn't hire peacekeepers. You leased survival. Temporary. At cost. When the guards moved to restrain Shaw again, he raised his hands without protest. Before stepping off the platform, he turned back one last time. Every galaxy has predators, he said. But only one learned how to become its own extinction event. Then he was gone. The tribunal adjourned in silence. Tark remained, alone at the edge of the platform, watching the flickering lights dim. He'd said everything he could. Showed them the blood. The footage. The faces. He had brought them the last surviving Terran soldier in Imperial custody, and still, he saw denial in their eyes. They didn't understand. Or worse, they did, and refused to admit it. Trelise appeared beside him, quiet. Do you think they'll pull back the deployment order? No, Tark whispered. They'll triple it. Even after all this? Tark stared at the dark ceiling above. They don't fear Earth. Not yet. Not until Earth stops taking orders and starts giving them. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small data core, one last piece of encrypted testimony. He placed it on the tribunal desk and walked away. As he reached the doors, he paused. You were warned, he said softly. Then he left them behind, a room full of empires too proud to listen and too blind to see the fire they'd lit.